So there's another question from the audience. Okay, let's take right down here, the second row.
Unfortunately, as a Democrat, it has been long determined that to vote for the lesser of the two evils, right? Either the Dems or the Republican. But it has gotten to the point where both of them are just as worse. One is cancer and one is HIV. So you don't want to vote for either one of them. And that's what happened. Over 40% of people who could have voted, they didn't vote, or they voted for somebody else, or they vote somebody else in. Now the problem being is nothing's working, okay? But in the interim, I know the system sucks, but what are you supposed to do in the interim, okay?
The problem, I don't want to sound flippant or silly, but the problem with voting for the lesser evil is, and I don't even like to use the word evil, but let's just take it there. The problem with voting for the lesser evil is that you're voting for evil. See, that's the problem. But let's get deeper than that, because that could just be, just a clever saying that doesn't have much meaning. The problem is you have the system that operates in certain ways, and it's not. I noticed, for example, Charles Blow, who's a columnist who writes for the New York Times, and he's a commentator sometimes on CNN. He's sort of a middle class black guy, and he wrote this column about how terrible Trump is, but then he turned all of his anger at the end, or a lot of it, toward people who didn't vote, and therefore you're responsible for why Trump is in now. But you see, let's step back a little bit and look at the larger picture. The reason that Trump is in is not because or that things have come to this situation, is not because, the cause of it is not that people didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. Because, let's step back a little bit. A lot of people did vote for Obama. And they got Obama. And then, why do we get Trump? Because the kinds of things that the system is doing in this country and in the world lead a lot of people on the terms of the system to want to have this kind of fascist solution. And the Hillary Clintons and Barack Obamas of the world did not challenge and cannot challenge the underlying assumptions and the underlying dynamics of the system that push people in that direction, and lead people in that direction. Let me give you an example. You have people who said that they voted for Obama. Look, I'm not a racist. I voted for Trump, but I'm not a racist because I voted for Obama, not once, but twice. But what were they looking for when they voted for Obama? They were looking for someone who would tell them that this is a post-racial society where there's no longer any discrimination and oppression. And if you want proof, look, we elected a black president. I even voted for him. So now, don't come around and tell me about how there's any oppression going on. If you're not doing well, it's your own fault. And I don't want to hear about the police shooting down people, because this is a post-racial society. We voted for Obama. That proves it. So if somebody got shot by the police, they must have been doing something wrong. See, a lot of these white people who voted for Obama and then voted for Trump, they wanted Obama to prove that there was no longer any oppression, so nobody should complain about it anymore. And as much as people don't want to talk about this, Obama said the same thing. When Obama got reelected in 2012, in his victory speech on election night, he said, if you work hard and do the right thing in this country, I'm paraphrasing, but this is the essence of what he said. If you work hard and do the right thing in this country, you can be anything you want to be and get ahead. Now that's a lie. Millions of people's lives prove that's a lie. And what is, stop and think a minute. I pointed this out before. There was a woman in the Trump campaign in Ohio who had to resign from the, think about this, she had to resign from the Trump campaign because she openly said, basically, there's no discrimination in this society. If black people are complaining and they're not doing well, it's their own fault. She had to resign after she said that, but Obama's speech said exactly the same thing. She just said it in nasty terms, and Obama said it in very hopeful terms. But think of the logic, it's the same thing. Listen to Obama's words and think of the meaning and the implication. If you work hard and do the right thing, then you can succeed. What's the logical conclusion? If you are not succeeding, then you are not working hard and doing the right thing, which is exactly the same thing this woman in Ohio said, but Obama said it in hopeful terms. And, you know, I could go on and on about Obama, how he's tied in with all, how he, when he came up, talked about himself as a community organizer. What he really did was get involved with all these real estate interests in Chicago that destroyed public housing and, you know, dissipated and dispersed people all over the city, which, you know, look, I'm not one of these people that believes the line that some people run out in Chicago. It was better when we had when we had a more organized gang structure. The problem now is that all the gang structure is broken down. And so all these crazy youth are running around here with no discipline and no organization. But the fact is that the destruction of the housing projects in Chicago did have the effect of dispersing a lot of people around and actually knocking down a lot of this gang structure. And there is a lot of craziness that's arisen out of it. So I guess I just said, no, I don't actually agree with that. But there is something there. But think about this. Obama is the head of a system. He's not an individual acting on his own. Whatever, you know, first of all, I mean, he's going around now making these multi-$1,000 speeches to businessmen in Brazil and all these other places promoting, you know, the globalized capitalism. So that's where he's coming from. You know, but nevertheless, think about it this way. What did Obama say when Freddie Gray was murdered by the police? Yes, he was murdered by the police, and of course they got off. But what did Obama say when the youth said, "That's goddamn it, that's enough"? And they rose up and burned down a few things. Obama went on TV and called them thugs. So this provides fertile ground then for the kind of thing that's represented by Trump. Because you have this illusion that with this president, Obama, we have now entered into a post-racial society and nobody should be complaining about being discriminated against and oppressed and murdered by the police and so on. And then when people do righteously rise up against things like police murder, then all these people, you know, and they'll tell you. I remember one woman said, well, I voted for Obama, but when he got up and said that Trayvon Martin could have been his son, that was just too much for me. See, and the only reason Obama said that was because, you know, he recognized and his advisors told him, you are going to lose all credibility among black people and anybody who cares about black people if you don't say something in the face of this. So it is this system that's creating the conditions. You see, what I was getting at in my talk is that this is a system that's had white supremacy woven into it from the very beginning. And there is no alternative that the ruling forces can put up that's going to get rid of white supremacy. Not Hillary Clinton, not Barack Obama, not any Democrat that comes along. Not Bernie Sanders, not anybody. They can't get rid of the white supremacy. They can't get rid of the male supremacy. They can't get rid of the whole exploitative nature of the system itself. And everything all the exploitation that it depends on all throughout the world, with little children working for, you know, pittances. making a lot of the products that go into cell phones and computers and other things. They can't do away with all that. So therefore, when people, want to cling to their white supremacy, and a Trump comes forward and overtly appeals to that, they're going to go with that, and there's nobody in the ruling circles that's going to really oppose that. Hillary Clinton may talk about, well, these people that support Trump are a basket of deplorables, or whatever she called it. The only thing she said wrong about that, in my opinion, she said half of them. Unfortunately, it's more than half. Not everybody who voted for Trump is a racist, but every one of them was willing to support a racist, which makes them a racist. Okay? So, and the same, all these things, like the question of women, the subordinate position of women, denying women the right not only to abortion, but even birth control, denying them the right to have control of their own bodies in that way. This is something that the Christian fascists and the Republican Party in general have been pushing aggressively, passing all kinds of repressive laws on the state level and so on. And the Democrats will only half-heartedly oppose them. Why? Because to really oppose them, you have to go up against the religious fundamentalism. You have to call into question the whole subordinate position of women in this society and point out and say that's what it is and it should go. And it can't go under this system, so there's no Democrat who's really going to do that. And the Democrats are always trying to prove that they're, more patriotic than at least as patriotic as the Republicans. They support the wars at least as much. Now, I'll get to your question about religion in a second, but here's another example. There was a case where this guy, Michael Niedow, I think was his name, from California, challenged the Pledge of Allegiance. In particular, the phrase, under God, one nation under God. Now, it's interesting, just to take a little more time. That phrase was not originally in the Pledge of Allegiance. It was added in the 1950s under President Eisenhower during the Cold War against the Soviet Union to contrast the religious America with the atheistic communism of the Soviet Union. That's how why we have, it was the anti-communism that injected that under God into the Pledge of Allegiance. And Michael Niedow challenged this, and his challenge went, because his kid was being forced to say this in school. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And it's interesting that the head of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice at that time, Rehnquist, said to Michael Niedow in this Supreme Court hearing, well, I don't hear, under God, it's not promoting any particular God. And Michael Niedow said, I don't see how you can argue that under God means no God. So obviously God's being promoted here. It's one thing for people to have religious freedom. It's another thing for the state to impose religion on people. And that's what making kids say one nation under God is doing, clearly. And the Supreme Court ruled against this guy, but he had a very good argument. Well, what did the Democratic Party do in the middle of this? A whole bunch of Democratic Party Congress people came out of the steps of Congress and very vociferously repeated the Pledge of Allegiance, emphasizing the phrase under God, to prove that they're every bit as religious as the Christian fascists in the Republican Party. So these people are not going to challenge any of the fundamental assumptions of the system. They can't. So when the system goes to work creating conditions that reinforce what leads to a Trump, the Democratic Party is no answer to it. Cannot provide an answer because it's operating on the basis of the same system that's produced this. And so people, go down the road of supporting Democrats like people supported Obama, only to find that the dynamics of things lead to a situation where more and more people are supporting a fascist. And it's only by breaking out of that that you can find any solution to it. And so the question, the system does suck. The question is, what do? We have to break out of that framework and go up against this system. At least now we're talking about on the level of driving out the fascist regime that's actually come to power. And I would argue on a more fundamental level, we need to go up against the system to get rid of it altogether as the more fundamental and ultimate solution. So that's one thing. By the way, on religious freedom, you notice how they have this whole thing, like there's a case going to the Supreme Court where this baker in somewhere, I think maybe in Colorado or somewhere, is refused to make a cake for a wedding of a gay couple. And he cited religious freedom. It's against my religious principles to do this. Well, then fucking don't have a business, okay? That's the first thing. But, you want to make cakes for yourself with your own artistry, fine. But if you're in business, that's different. And think about the logic. My religion tells me that I shouldn't have to serve women. It's against my religion. Well, you can justify anything in the name of your religion. You can invent religions to justify things. Going back to Chicago again, there's this prominent gang leader named Jeff Fort, who was the leader of the Keystone Nation gang. And he was in and out of jail. And at one time after he came out of a long stint in prison, he got a bright idea. He said, I'm going to change the name of the organization from the Keystone Nation to the El Rukns. And I'm going to declare myself a Muslim religious leader. And the El Rukns are going to be a religious organization. Guess what? Jeff Fort is spending the rest of his life in a federal prison somewhere. They didn't give a about his religious freedom when it got in the way of what they wanted to do. They didn't care that he claimed, well, it's my religious beliefs that are leading me to do this. So it all depends on what the content of your religious beliefs is.